The rain came down in sheets, blurring the neon lights of downtown Portland into a kaleidoscope of color that danced across the pavement. I stood under the awning of a shuttered bookstore, my breath fogging in the chilly air, waiting for him, Elliot, my best friend since we were kids, stealing comic books from each other's backpacks. Tonight felt different, though, like the world was holding its breath, and I didn't know why. Elliot and I had been inseparable for a decade, ever since we were 12, building forts in his backyard and sneaking into R-rated movies at the old theater on 5th Street. We were the kind of friends who could finish each other's sentences, who knew every scar and story the other carried. He was the guy who'd laugh at my terrible puns, who'd stay up all night with me when my mom got sick, who'd always been there until tonight, when he was late, and my gut twisted with a strange, unshakable unease. The rain slowed to a drizzle as I checked my phone again. No texts. Just the time glaring back, 8:47 p.m. We'd planned to meet at 8 o'clock for our usual Friday night ritual, grabbing burgers at Sally's Diner, then wandering the city until we forgot our problems. But Elliot had been acting off all week, dodging my calls, his texts short and clipped. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets, trying to shake the feeling that something was about to change. Then I saw him. Elliot emerged from the mist, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his green eyes catching the glow of a street lamp. He wore that old denim jacket I'd always teased him about, the one with the frayed cuffs he refused to replace. "Caleb," he called, his voice softer than usual, almost swallowed by the patter of rain. He stopped a few feet away, hands stuffed in his pockets, looking like he was carrying the weight of the world. "You're late, man," I said, forcing a grin to hide the knot in my chest. "Thought you ditched me for someone cooler." He didn't laugh. Instead, he took a step closer, his gaze flickering to the ground, then back to me. "I need to talk to you," he said, and the way his voice cracked made my heart stutter. "It's important." We ended up at the edge of Laurelhurst Park, sitting on a damp bench under a canopy of dripping trees. The city hummed faintly in the distant cars. Laughter, life, but here, it was just us and the quiet. Elliot was fidgeting, his knee bouncing like it always did when he was nervous. I wanted to crack a joke, to lighten the mood, but the air between us felt too heavy, too charged. "Caleb," he started, then stopped, running a hand through his wet hair. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for years." His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something raw there, fear. Maybe. Or hope. Or both. "I can't keep pretending I'm just your friend." My breath caught. The words hung between us, sharp and fragile, like glass about to shatter. I opened my mouth to say anything, but nothing came out. Elliot's hand reached for mine, tentative at first, then firm, his fingers cold but steady. "I'm in love with you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been in love with you for so long, and I can't pretend anymore." The world tilted. My best friend, the guy I'd shared every secret with, was looking at me like I was his entire universe. And the worst part, deep down, in a place I'd never dared to look, I knew I felt something I'd buried under years of denial. Fear, and the weight of what it might mean. "Elliot," I started, but my voice faltered. His grip tightened, like he was afraid I'd run. And maybe I would have, if my heart wasn't pounding so loud it drowned out the rain. "Don't say anything yet," he said quickly, his eyes searching mine. Just think about it. Please. That night, as I walked home alone, the city felt different, brighter, sharper, like I was seeing it for the first time. My mind replayed his words, his touch, the way his eyes had held mine. I'd always thought I knew Elliot inside and out. But this was a side of him I'd never seen. A truth he'd hidden so well it made me question everything. How long had he felt this way? And why was my heart racing at the thought of him? The next few days were a blur. I avoided Elliot's calls. Not because I was angry, but because I was terrified. Growing up in a small Oregon town, I'd heard the whispers, seen the looks thrown at kids who didn't fit the mold. My dad, a mechanic with a temper as rough as his hands, had made it clear what he thought of those people. I'd spent my whole life trying to be the son he wanted, tough, straight, normal. But now, with Elliot's confession burning in my mind, I couldn't ignore the truth. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I kept replaying moments from our friendship late night talks on his roof. The time he hugged me after my mom's funeral, and I felt safe for the first time in months. Had I been blind to what was between us? Or had I just been too scared to see it? By Wednesday, I couldn't avoid him anymore. He showed up at my apartment, his face pale but determined. "You're freaking out," he said, leaning against my doorway. "I get it. But you can't just ghost me, Caleb. Not after everything." "I'm not ghosting you," I lied, my voice hoarse. "I just need time." "Time for what?" he pressed, stepping closer. "To pretend I didn't say it. To pretend you don't feel something too." His words hit like a punch. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off like I always did. But the look in his eyes stopped me. He was right, I did feel something. But admitting it meant unraveling everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, my future. "I don't know what I feel," I admitted finally, my voice breaking. "But I don't want to lose you." Elliot's expression softened, and for a moment, I thought he might reach for me again. Instead, he nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll wait," he said. "But not forever." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind a battlefield of fear and longing. I thought about my dad, about the town I'd grown up in, about the world that wouldn't understand. But mostly, I thought about Elliot, his laugh, his courage, the way he'd always been my anchor. And for the first time, I let myself imagine what it might be like to hold his hand and not let go. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk between what was and what could be. Elliot and I still hung out. But every glance, every brush of his shoulder against mine, carried a weight it hadn't before. I caught myself watching him, how his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how his hands moved when he talked about his dreams of opening a coffee shop someday. It was like I was seeing him for the first time, and it terrified me as much as it thrilled me. Portland's autumn deepened, the leaves turning fiery shades of red and gold, mirroring the chaos in my heart. I started noticing things I'd ignored before, like how Elliot's voice softened when he said my name, or how he'd linger a little too long when we said goodbye. But with every step closer to him, the shadow of my father loomed larger. I hadn't told Dad about Elliot's confession, but I could hear his voice in my head, sharp and unforgiving. "You're not one of them, Caleb. Don't embarrass me." One evening, we ended up at Sally's Diner, the place where we'd spent countless nights talking over greasy fries and milkshakes. The neon sign buzzed above us, casting a pink glow over Elliot's face as he stirred his coffee absently. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his tone careful, like he was afraid of pushing too hard. I shrugged, poking at my fries. "Just thinking." "About me?" he asked, half teasing, but his eyes were serious. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering. "Yeah," I admitted. "About everything." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Caleb, I know this is hard. I know you're scared. But I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to." The sincerity in his words broke something in me. I wanted to reach across the table, to tell him I was ready to face whatever this was. But fear clamped down like a vice. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about his latest art project. And he let me, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. The turning point came a week later, at a local art gallery where Elliot's paintings were being shown. He'd been working on them for months, pouring his soul into vibrant canvases that told stories of love and loss. I stood in the crowded room, surrounded by strangers admiring his work, and felt a surge of pride and something deeper, something I couldn't name yet. Elliot found me near a painting of two figures under a stormy sky, their hands almost touching. "That's us," he said quietly, standing so close I could feel the warmth of his arm. "Or what I hope we could be." I stared at the painting, my throat tight. The figures were blurred, their faces undefined, but the emotion was unmistakable: longing, fear, hope, all tangled together. "It's beautiful," I managed, my voice barely audible. "So are you," he said, and before I could process it, he took my hand, right there in the middle of the gallery. My first instinct was to pull away, to look around and see who was watching. But his grip was steady, grounding me. For the first time, I didn't let go. That night, we walked through the city, hand in hand, the world both terrifying and electric. We didn't talk about it, not the confession, not the future, just walked, letting the moment carry us. But when we stopped at a quiet street corner, Elliot turned to me, his eyes bright with something fierce. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers," he said. "I'm just asking you to try." I nodded, my heart in my throat. "I'm trying," I whispered, and for the first time, I meant it. But the world wasn't as kind as that moment. The next day, I got a call from my dad, his voice gruff and demanding. "Heard you've been spending a lot of time with that Elliot kid," he said, the judgment clear in his tone. "People are talking. Caleb, don't do anything stupid." The words hit like a slap. I mumbled some excuse and hung up. But the damage was done. Doubt crept in, cold and suffocating. What if Dad was right? What if this whatever it was with Elliot was a mistake? I spent the next few days pulling back, keeping my distance, telling myself it was for the best. Elliot noticed. Of course. He always did. One night, he showed up at my apartment, his face stormy. "What's going on, Caleb?" he demanded, pacing my cramped living room. "One minute you're holding my hand, and the next you're acting like I don't exist. Talk to me." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the weight of my father's words, of the world I'd grown up in, pressed down on me. "I don't know if I can do this," I said finally, my voice breaking. "My dad, my family, they'll never understand." Elliot's face fell, but he didn't back down. This isn't about them, he said, stepping closer. This is about us. About you. What do you want? Caleb. I didn't have an answer. Not then. But as he left, the door clicking shut behind him, I felt like I'd just lost something I might never get back. The days without Elliot were a quiet kind of agony. I went through the motions: work, home, sleep, but the world felt duller, like the color had been drained from it. I missed his laugh, his stupid jokes, the way he made everything feel possible. But more than that, I missed the version of myself I was with him, the version that wasn't afraid to feel. I kept replaying our last conversation, his question echoing in my mind. What do you want, Caleb? The truth was, I'd spent so long running from that question that I didn't know how to answer it. But the ache in my chest told me one thing: I couldn't keep running. A week later, I found myself outside Elliot's apartment, my hands shaking as I knocked. When he opened the door, his eyes widened, then softened, like he'd been waiting for me. Caleb, he said, and just hearing my name in his voice made my resolve waver. I'm sorry, I blurted out. For pulling away. For being scared. I don't know how to do this. But I know I don't want to lose you. Elliot stepped aside, letting me in. His apartment smelled like paint and coffee, familiar and comforting. We sat on his couch, the silence heavy but not unkind. I'm scared too, he admitted, his voice low. But I'd rather be scared with you than pretend I don't feel this way. Those words broke the last of my defenses. I reached for his hand, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I love you, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I think I've loved you for a long time. I was just too afraid to see it. Elliot's eyes shone with tears, but he was smiling a smile that lit up the room. That lit up me. He leaned in, and when our lips met, it was like the world finally made sense. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper, full of everything we'd both been holding back for years. But love doesn't erase the world's sharp edges. When I finally told my dad, it was worse than I'd feared. He didn't yell, didn't scream, just looked at me with a coldness I'd never seen before. You're not my son, he said, and hung up. The words cut deeper than I'd expected. But as I sat with Elliot later that night, his hand in mine, I realized I could survive it. I had to. We started building a life together, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. There were whispers at work, sidelong glances from strangers, moments when fear crept back in. But there were also mornings waking up next to Elliot, his warmth grounding me, nights laughing over takeout, quiet moments when he'd sketch me while I pretended not to notice. With him, I was learning who I could be: someone brave, someone honest, someone whole. One evening, a year later, we stood in Laurel Hills Park again, under the same street lamp where he'd first confessed. The air was crisp, the stars bright above the city. Elliot pulled me close, his breath warm against my cheek. You're my home, Caleb, he said, and I felt the truth of it in my bones. As we walked home, hand in hand, I thought about the boy I'd been, the one who'd been so afraid of love, of himself. That boy was still part of me, but he wasn't all of me anymore. With Elliot, I'd found something worth fighting for, a love that was honest, a life that was mine. And in the end, that was enough.